Hello everyone, and welcome back to Best Manhwa Recap. Your support means a lot to me, and I am thrilled to introduce you to this new manhwa. It was 2047. 25 years have passed since interdimensional gates to hell opened worldwide. The world has changed beyond recognition, and humanity has perished, except for one person who fought for their dream. He abstained from food and drink for a full 25 years, dedicating himself to the same task. His mission was to collect 666,666 demon skulls. Today, Namgung finally managed to collect the last skull, completing the legendary hidden quest and earning a chance to return to the past. His unwavering dedication to the past was driven by one sole reason. He longed to see his late daughter once more, to hold her in his arms and to hear her voice echoing through their home. Furthermore, he aimed to prevent the earth from descending into its current state. For 25 years, Namgung had been slaying demons and collecting their skulls. It was a grueling and challenging journey that he managed to successfully complete, overcoming countless obstacles and facing unimaginable challenges along the way. Before his death, the last demon managed to say that it wasn't the end, and they would meet again. The man didn't want to listen to him. He believed in his dream, and waited for the moment when he could see his daughter again. After a long and challenging journey, he managed to return to the past, accompanied by a radiant golden light. When Namgung came to his senses, he realized he had traveled back in time. In the next moment, he hurried into his daughter's room, eager to see her alive as quickly as possible. Gazing upon his slumbering daughter, the man's emotions welled up. In those years, the opening of the gates of hell had led to countless monsters invading the human world. Fighting for his daughter's life, he was injured and couldn't hold on to her. Unfortunately, his daughter became a victim of those creatures that had taken over the world. This moment left an indelible memory on his entire life. Losing his beloved daughter, he could never forgive himself. After reliving his memories, he exited the room. At that instant, the emotions Namgung had suppressed for so long finally erupted. Nevertheless, he was acutely aware that this fleeting happiness would be short-lived, for the world still faced the looming threat of demon invasion, and his ultimate mission was yet to be completed. Namgung understands that there will come a time when the gates of hell will open, and the world will cease to exist if nothing is changed. He doubts his abilities. Can he protect Suman and survive at the very gates of hell simultaneously? No, he shouldn't doubt himself like that. He needs to figure out how to save the earth, and his beloved daughter. He has been given another chance and must make the most of it. Even if he has to sacrifice his life, he will never let the shadows of darkness overcome the light that resides in the hearts of those he loves. Meanwhile, Namgung realizes that he has gained magical power, mastered the art of summoning, and opened the eye of the soul. He looks at the energy slowly gathering in his palm. Has his return not stripped him of his magic? At this very moment, he senses the presence of an unseen observer, a silent witness to his existence. As he gazes upon a photograph of his beloved daughter, a thought takes root in his mind. Could it be her? Although he doesn't understand why his magic hasn't disappeared, perhaps it's a privilege of those who have returned. He comprehended that there was very little time remaining before the events would unfurl once more. Only 3 days remained until October 11th, when the gates of hell would manifest themselves. Nevertheless, there were those who had become aware of their existence. 3 days prior to the impending catastrophe, 8 prophets, chosen warriors, shall emerge. They are humanity's saviors, and their abilities develop much faster than ordinary people. If he uses the experience he's accumulated over the past 25 years, he can gain an advantage and many resources. On October 8th, 3 days before the impending catastrophe, Namgung ventures into a store whose entrance exudes an eerie ambiance. Descending into the depths, he finds himself in an underground warehouse. Following the store's directions, he arrives at a specific location. However, something about it unsettles him. But something feels off. There shouldn't be anyone here. Everything appears different from what he had anticipated. He spots a man seated, patiently awaiting his arrival. Namgung informed him that he had come to purchase items from Yasha. In the next moment, a colossal hand hurtles towards him. A formidable force pins him against the wall, rendering him utterly immobile. He struggled to grasp what was happening. Everything seemed shrouded in mist, making it difficult to discern his assailant. As the mist began to dissipate, a monstrous figure materialized before him. This entity inquired about his identity and the purpose of his presence. This monster appeared truly menacing, with its large fangs and a single glowing eye. Namgung uttered quietly that he had heard that chosen ones were selected here. However, Yasha appeared bewildered. Had someone summoned him? He had believed that the selection process was still ongoing. Namgung responded that this was precisely why he had come here. He wanted to claim their position before the selection process concluded. He needed to secure a spot among the chosen 8 to have the opportunity to defend the land and his daughter. This greatly amused the monster. A mere mortal had come to him to save the world. After a moment, the expression on Yasha's face shifted, indicating that he had remembered something. Then, he changed his tone. So, are you the one who vanquished over 600 high-ranking demons? You thought we knew nothing? We know everything. You've altered time. But now you're trapped. Your return won't change anything. This place is a game of higher powers. If you ruin everything, their wrath will be terrible. At that moment, 3 daggers fly towards Yasha, piercing his hand. He could have completely deprived him of his arm, but it seemed he needed to acclimate to his new body to effectively battle the demons. Moreover, he was lacking certain runes and capabilities to attain the powers he desired. Yasha told him that this place was created by higher forces, and interfering with their plan would greatly anger them. Namgung replied that if these higher powers had allowed him to return, then they must be indifferent to what would transpire here. His calmness and confidence further fueled the demon's rage, and it made another attempt to strike him, swinging its massive hand. However, with a single powerful strike of his hand, Namgung halts the demon's attack, asserting his dominance. Calming his anger, he said, "Do you truly believe I returned without reason? I have already fulfilled my mission. This means I've destroyed over 600,000 demons." Seeing this, Yasha is filled with fear. Because of this, his powers begin to wane. From the massive demon that once appeared invincible, it began transforming into a harmless spirit. This was precisely what he had sought to achieve. Realizing that Yasha was no longer a threat and had become a harmless being, he shared 2 things that he needed Yasha to know. First, until the gates of hell open, you, representatives of races, cannot harm humans. It's one of the rules. Second, the reason I came here was to meet a yaksha for your bundle, and when the gates of hell open, don't even think about killing me. You, the second most powerful in the Yasha clan, Jeriel. How do you think I know your real name? Because we're a perfect match. Do you mean you've been my master? The man's gaze becomes even more piercing. Yasha is so scared he can't utter a word. Namgung activates the prophet's shop to choose the necessary items for himself. The next moment, numerous windows appear before him. As he had suspected, this shop was indeed meant for the chosen ones. The shop has many rare items, but their price is astronomical. If we consider that he receives 1 head for each monster he kills, he will never be able to buy anything here. However, his attention was drawn to one particular item. He realized that he needed to obtain it by any means necessary, as he had no time to collect demon heads. He looked at Yasha and asked him to kindly gift him that item. His request was impulsive, as he was aware that nobody gave away such items. They had to be purchased by collecting the required number of demon heads. This request greatly surprised the demon and left it bewildered. It had never heard of anything like it before. To obtain this item, one needed to reach a specific level of friendliness. Namgung pulls the dagger out of Yasha's hand. Then he offered him 20 million, which was a significant sum of money for such an item. But Yasha showed no interest. He understood that while it might be a significant sum now, in 3 days, it would be worthless pieces of paper. However, the man insisted that he take the money. He explained that in 2 years, it would save his life when the dark night fell. But this left the demon puzzled. It didn't understand what the man was trying to convey. He persistently tried to convince the demon, stating that he knew money would always be valuable even after the gates of hell were opened. Yasha wasn't sure if he was telling the truth or not, but the thought of making the wrong choice angered him. Namgung added that it was his choice whether to heed the advice or not, but in 2 years, he would deeply regret not having listened. Understanding that he might make a regrettable mistake, Yasha handed over the scrolls and asked him what he would do with them. Not hearing a response, he turned away, bowed his head in sadness, and began to walk away. The weight of uncertainty bore down on him as he contemplated the consequences of his choice. In that moment, Namgung unfurled the scroll, fully aware of why he had acquired it and how to make use of its contents. Using the scroll, in the next second, the space around him suddenly began to shift, crackling into fine particles. He seemed to know what he was doing. His goal was to meet the main villain. Following the teleportation, a potent presence enveloped him. as though an imperceptible energy enshrouded the essence of his very being. He beheld a colossal red eye that had fixed its gaze upon him, observing his every move. It appeared as if he had been here before and felt a sense of confidence. Although the surroundings appeared ominous, after 25 years of demon hunting, he had become accustomed to such places. Without wasting any time, he proceeded down the long road, heading towards a rendezvous with the principal inhabitant of these lands. Behind him, Yasha followed. He was familiar with this place, and he was curious about how this journey would conclude, and how swiftly Namgung would be deprived of life. He was also keen on discovering the answer to one question. Realizing that the man knew about the 8 chosen prophets through teleportation from the past and now sought to wrest their privileges away from them. He wondered what he intended to do with the prophets who would arrive here and refuse to yield their privilege to him. He chose not to respond to this question, but it was evident that it did not trouble him in the slightest. Later, they heard the lament of the ghostly Choi Huesu, which brought a sense of satisfaction to the man, as if this was precisely what he had been seeking. It was an enormous, invincible entity, one of the 8 martial stars. He commanded legions of the undead and was practically immortal. However, in the eyes of people, he appeared as a man with whom no one wanted to deal, for he was a psychopath. To harness the power of the undead, he required corpses, and Choi Huesu conducted experiments to create the perfect cadaver for his army. Walking down this eerie road, Yasha incessantly emphasized the need for caution. Upon entering the territory of the owner of the 7 serpents, they heard a horrifying voice proclaiming that they had not been granted permission to enter. He also questioned Yasha about why he had brought a man into his realm, stating that only the prophet he had chosen was allowed to enter here, and this was an ordinary man. Namgung conveyed to him that not choosing him was his greatest mistake. He should have done it sooner. Yasha also added that this was the individual who had managed to slay 666 demons and return to the past. This troubled Choi Huesu greatly. He had longed to encounter the one who had disrupted the rules of the game, but he was convinced that this man lacked the skill to replace the prophet he had chosen. Namgung, incensed by these remarks, decided to showcase his abilities. He leapt upwards, reaching the eye, and with an insane force struck it. Yasha observed this in disbelief, unable to trust his own eyes. Attacking such a mighty ghost was a reckless notion. Choi Huesu, realizing that the man before him was no ordinary person, asked where he had acquired such power. This question hinted to the man that, despite being a higher being, Choi Huesu did not possess complete knowledge. Namgung responded that his strength had granted him the ability to return to the past and navigate numerous intricate situations. He also added that this power had been bestowed upon him by the prophet he would choose. This information piqued Choi Huesu's interest, and he revealed his true form. It was the master of the 7 serpents who expressed his surprise that Namgung had passed the trial and slain 666,666 demons. But he was late because the 8 prophets had already been chosen. The man stated that he was the sole survivor and had never served him. All those whom he had chosen as prophets had perished, leaving only him. He had come not to beg for the position of a prophet, but to offer a chance. However, if the master of the 7 serpents did not select him, it would be his mistake. Namgung would bring victory to another higher being, and the one chosen as the prophet would be the first to meet his demise. These words resonated like a chilling omen. Such threats angered the master of the 7 serpents, and he was ready to extinguish him in that very moment. Somewhat calming down, he inquired why he should choose him. Namgung, though ready to depart, responded that if he chose him, it would help him win this game. He explained that when he was unaware of the gates of hell, which were about to be opened again, he had managed to defeat everyone and return to the past. Now, with his abilities and knowledge, he was certain he could replicate that success. These arguments pleased the master of the 7 serpents, and he changed his decision, selecting him as the prophet. In that very moment, Namgung became the serpent prophet and gained the privilege of access to the serpent's treasure trove. The man was elated that he had successfully persuaded the master of the 7 serpents to choose him. Following this, they ventured into the serpent's treasure trove, a triad of venomous doors. He would only be able to open the copper door, and from there he could take whatever he desired. Additionally, this delightful entity introduced herself as Yor. Having opened the doors, he and Yasha returned to their own world. In that very moment, he acquired a new item, the Monarch Leoric's headpiece. Grade: Legendary. It was the helmet of the greatest, most arrogant king in history. It granted immense power, but came with a price for the sins of arrogance. When the living wore this helmet, it drained their life force, and when the dead wore it, they gained tremendous strength. Yasha became curious about what he would choose. He knew that for the living, this helmet held no value. Namgung took the helmet and asked him to open a shop so that he could select a sword for himself. Yasha stated that he wouldn't sell him anything for money anymore. He only required demon heads. However, Namgung showed him a bag filled with heads that he had received from Yor. He also cautioned him that if demons gave something, they would inevitably demand something in return. Namgung replied that in return, he had been given a legendary quest that he must fulfill. He also received a hidden quest titled The 7 Incarnations of the Serpent. Having finished his story, he once again asked him to open a shop with at least rare quality swords, so that he could purchase one using the demon heads he had received. Yasha stated that he had 2 swords and displayed their stats. Namgung read the description of the swords and realized that the first sword was excellent, but it had a curse effect. After some contemplation, he chose the second sword, which was inferior but free from curses. He also wanted to purchase a bag, but the demon gifted it to him as a token of their friendship. Having completed all his tasks, he stepped out onto the street. Yasha transformed back into a human and followed him. He inquired about where Namgung was headed, assuming he might be going to hunt prophets. However, Namgung explained that he was going to pick up his daughter since her school lessons would be finishing soon. With just 2 days left until the opening of the gates of hell, he picked up his daughter from school, returned home, and prepared dinner. Afterward, they headed to the store in search of purchases. He acquired an abundance of exquisite treats, and they both returned home to play the games his daughter loved. She joyfully spent her time, and Namgung wanted to prolong this moment of happiness with his daughter, as if it were a moment of clarity in a life filled with chaos. After spending the entire day together, they went to bed. It was the best day of his life in the last 25 years. In the morning, Someone showed him a backpack filled with various survival supplies that she had gathered as per her father's request. He was greatly surprised that his daughter had trusted him and gathered everything necessary. Holding hands, they headed to the National Cemetery. Namgung longed to meet a friend there who could assist him in executing his plan for these 2 days. Approaching the vending machines, he spotted his friend who paid him respect in accordance with the established tradition of the place where they had served together. Overjoyed by the reunion, Namgung greeted his friend, giving him a friendly tap on the shoulder as if they hadn't seen each other for an eternity. In the meantime, his daughter, after a long journey, was sleeping in the back seat of the car. Namgung knew that today there was nothing good to expect, so he met his friend right here, far away from Seoul. Myung-hoon was puzzled by such information. On this sunny day, could anything bad really happen? The man continued, saying that he needed to tell something. After a brief pause, he asked, "If the world is coming to an end soon, would you believe it?" After not finishing his cola, he unexpectedly coughed, and then laughing, he said, "That's a good joke. But did you come all this way just to tell it to me?" Not knowing how to convince his friend of this truly strange information, Namgung furrowed his brows and said, "I wish it were really a joke, but it's not." Myung-hoon realized that it was indeed not a joke, stopped laughing and froze in anticipation, not knowing how to act in such a situation. Moments later, a terrifying sound echoed through the place where they were, and the ground began to shake as if the end of the world had truly come. He got up from the bench to inspect and understand what was happening. Realizing that something very bad had happened, he shouted that they needed to get out of here urgently and call 911. Namgung knew there was nowhere to run. He drew his sword, the one Yasha had sold to him, and in a determined voice, he declared that he was going to kill each of them. Meanwhile, the goblins, who were the first harbingers of the apocalypse, began to appear in large numbers and attack people. It was a horrifying sight. People didn't know how to react and instinctively tried to run as far away from that place as possible. Myung-hoon also tried to convince his friend that they needed to run, but Namgung seemed to have frozen in anticipation of a great battle. A second before the goblins attacked, he turned around and said, "Let's survive together this time." Myung-hoon, resigning himself to the inevitable, and realizing that there was no way to retreat, also joined the fight and tried to assist his friend. These goblins were just a warm-up and posed no challenge to Namgung. He effortlessly swung his sword, cutting them into pieces. His only concern was his daughter, who was in the car, lying there unprotected. He asked his friend to go and bring her to him so that he could protect them. There was no time for contemplation or discussion. Myung-hoon obeyed the command and immediately headed toward where the car was located. He did his best to assist his friend in any way he could. Namgung continued to battle the goblins, but realized that he needed to kill the source of their appearance to stop this onslaught. Looking up at the sky, he saw a giant eye from which it seemed like an endless number of goblins were pouring down like a waterfall. Suddenly he heard Yor's voice, which conveyed to him, "Since you've become my protege, let me offer you one piece of advice. You are the one who deals with the lives of the deceased. If you wish to save someone, in that moment, be weighing the lives of others. Be selfish. That is the path the seventh serpent's protege must walk. Whatever you do, you will not be able to escape the label of a hypocrite." Yor also granted him new abilities. He could now summon the spirits of the deceased who were nearby. While on the graveyard, Namgung instantly gathered the maximum number of souls for summoning. He had access to the second level of magic, allowing him to make 3 summons of the departed. Meanwhile, Myung-hoon, having taken his friend's daughter from the car and placed her on his back, was surprised that she hadn't woken up amidst the chaos outside. As he looked up at the sky, he was horrified to see a massive column of goblins descending to the ground and attacking people. There were so many goblins that he couldn't figure out where to run. Distracted for a moment by the chaos around, he didn't notice when one of the goblins attempted to attack him. With the girl on his back, he had no chance to defend himself from the attack. However, at that very moment, the goblin's head separated from its body. Namgung came to the rescue in time after summoning the spirits, but stated that there was no time to explain who these people were. He handed a sword to Myung-hoon, which would help him fend off the goblins. During his time in the army, he had been one of the best, and his skills should be enough to handle the goblins. Namgung didn't want to reveal his abilities and preferred his friend to fight the goblins. He knew that after the opening of the gates of hell, his friend had become the leader of the Armed Guardians clan, which had successfully battled demons. He was capable of fighting high-level demons, and now found it just as easy to deal with the goblins, cutting them down one by one without feeling threatened. After killing the last vile goblin, he looked at it and wanted to take a break. But as he looked up, he saw something enormous that filled him with horror. It was the giant goblin warrior, which was several times taller than a human. It seemed that dealing with such an opponent would be incredibly challenging. The goblin warrior spotted the man standing there and swinging his sword aimed to strike him down. However, Myung-hoon's skills enabled him to block the swift attack just in time. With a second, more powerful strike, the giant goblin managed to send Myung-hoon flying several yards away. It seemed like the opponent was almost defeated, but the giant goblin turned and headed towards the altar. The goblin's behavior deeply surprised the man, but Namgung explained to him that the goblins had built the altar as a place for offering their tributes to their leader. The goblins had turned the memorial tower into their base, and if they were not stopped, their numbers would quickly grow. He also added that killing the giant goblin would not change anything. They needed to defeat the world boss, who was the leader of the goblins. As they approached closer, his friend noticed that the goblin leader didn't appear menacing, but Namgung explained that he used magic, which was why the other goblins followed him. Afterward, he summoned the spirits and said that they needed to start by eliminating the goblin warriors. He added that in the future, many amazing events awaited them, so they needed to be prepared for anything. Their conversation caught the attention of the goblin warrior, and he turned around. Without much hesitation, Namgung pulled out his knife and threw it with precision at the goblin's eye, attempting to blind him. Taking advantage of the goblin's confusion, Namgung charged at him, leaping onto him, and driving 2 darts into him that were poisoned with the venom of a red wasp's sting, causing paralysis. The goblin was disoriented and unable to resist. Springing upward, Myung-hoon swung his sword, delivering a powerful blow to the goblin's neck. However, despite the high force of the strike, the giant goblin used a defensive ability, and his skin turned into something resembling armor, which prevented him from getting injured by that blow. After these attacks, the goblin regained his senses and let out a loud scream. The paralysis-inducing darts did not seem to affect him, and it appeared that he was ready to continue the fight, with their actions having caused him little harm. Namgung said that they needed to finish this goblin quickly before their leader joined the battle. The giant goblin swung his sword in an attempt to strike them, but they successfully dodged his attack. Using 3 darts this time, Namgung threw them, hitting the goblin in the chest. The triple dose of paralysis took effect, and he dropped to his knees. Taking advantage of the moment, Myung-hoon delivered a powerful blow, severing the goblin's head and leaving him no chance of survival. After the victory, Namgung praised his friend and said that they should not let their guard down and needed to head toward the goblin leader. Approaching the sacred altar where the goblin leader was said to reside, Namgung was struck with dread to find him missing. Turning, he saw his friend in peril. The goblin chieftain had begun to weave ancient spells. Myung-hoon, brimming with courage, lunged at the leader, but a formidable shield repelled his blade, throwing the young warrior several yards back. Realizing that brute strength would not suffice, Namgung brandished sword, proclaiming it to be a cursed blade housing a soul. Myung-hoon, harnessing the sword's power, activated the mystical soul's gaze of the second tier, catching the attention of both the goblin leader and his minions. Sensing the tide turning against him, the goblin lord commanded his troops to attack. Without hesitation, Namgung produced a silver demon hunter's dagger from his cloak and hurled it towards the oncoming goblins. The dagger's impact was lethal, exploding, and decimating all foes within a 5-yard radius. Myung-hoon communed with the executioner's spirit trapped within his blade, and with a powerful swing, shattered the goblin leader's defenses, beheading him with a subsequent strike. Thus, their first trial ended in triumph. The goblins lay defeated, darkness receded, and the gentle sun once again bathed the land, restoring its natural beauty. The time for rewards had come. From the defeated boss, gleaming golden chests tumbled to their feet. As the men pried them open, treasures of immeasurable value greeted their eyes. Among the spoils lay the goblin chieftain's ornament, of a simple yet imposing rank, worth 10,000 demon heads. Beside it rested a goblin skull of equal value. But there was more. A bracelet that once belonged to the goblin chieftain drew their gaze, radiating a magical aura. It housed the chieftain's own magic, and had the ability to summon a magical shield up to 5 times a day. The rarest item found in the chests was the heart of the goblin leader. It contained magic that, when absorbed by its wielder, increased their magical power, but it required hostile abilities towards magic. These rewards deeply impressed the men, especially the goblin's heart which caught their attention. They understood its immense value. However, their knowledge of magic was limited. Namgung, hoping to keep this precious item in his pocket, believed that once the gates of hell were opened, he could trade it on the market for many demon heads or swap it for another invaluable item. But fate had other plans. The heart stirred to life, seeking a suitable host to amplify their magical abilities. A surge of potent energy rushed towards its chosen target, his daughter Somin, who lay on the ground, deeply asleep, oblivious to the recent horrors. Grasping the gravity of the situation, Namgung rushed to his daughter's side. He watched as streams of magical essence wove around Somin, feeling the crescendo of power emanating from her. Despite the serene appearance, Somin, even in her slumber, absorbed the ancient force sealed within the goblin's heart. Namgung's emotions were in turmoil. While fear for his daughter's well-being gnawed at him, he also held on to hope that this newfound magic might unveil untapped potentials for her. As they observed intently, Somin's eyelids slowly fluttered open. A new, unbridled strength sparkled in her eyes, and she gazed at her father with a mix of astonishment and profound recognition. Casting her gaze around, Somin was struck by the horror before her. The battlefield, littered with the lifeless bodies of both humans and goblins, painted a grisly picture, too grim for words. Just as Somin was grappling with the devastation, a young boy rushed to her side. Pointing at his mother's corpse, his eyes brimming with tears, he pleaded for her help. Somin turned to her father, imploring him to take the boy with them. However, Namgung, although sympathetic, was adamant. He believed it was wiser to send the boy to Seoul, where sanctuaries existed and where he'd be much safer than with them. Their conversation was abruptly interrupted by the arrival of Yor, the Lord of the Seven Serpents, who emerged from the portal. He expressed his gratitude to them for killing the goblin chief, asserting that if they hadn't intervened, by midnight the goblins would have built their citadel and captured the entire city. However, he also noted that not all higher spirits approve of Namgung's actions, especially his decision to resurrect the dead before opening the gates of hell. Such actions were forbidden, and to atone for this mistake, Yor proposed a deal. Namgung would have to sacrifice the life of a child, and in return, the higher spirits would forgive his transgression. This proposal enraged Somin, and without hesitation she slapped Yor across the face. Yor had no desire to harm the girl, but using his magic, he pushed her aside so she wouldn't interfere with their conversation. Namgung, sensing danger for his daughter's life, rushed to her aid. But Yor, displaying another marvel of his magic, blocked Namgung's path, separating him from Somin. He stated that he had no desire to kill them. However, he emphasized that he needed to take a life and offered a choice between a boy, his daughter, or his friend. Suddenly, the heart of the goblin stirred to life, wrapping Somin in a cloud of birch leaves. She locked eyes with her father and whispered softly, "All will be well, I trust in you." Her eyes slowly closed, and a benevolent spirit soothed her, transforming her innate magical abilities. It was but a brief moment. When Somin opened her eyes again, her gaze had transformed. Namgung was taken aback by the metamorphosis in his daughter. Now, sensing newfound magical power, Somin attempted to strike at Yor, the Lord of the Seven Serpents, directing a potent beam of energy towards him. Her audacity merely drew a smirk from Yor. He knew that although Somin's magic was of legendary might, to the higher spirits, it was but a mere spark. He summoned his power, neutralizing Somin's enchantment. But the young girl was undeterred, conjuring an even mightier spell, trying to anchor Yor in place. This spell drained her immensely, and Somin, exhausted, collapsed to the ground, seemingly lifeless. Yor was taken aback by her valiance and approached to revive the maiden using his mystical prowess. He cured her and warned, "The higher spirits have witnessed this. Now they will hunt her for her prowess. You'll have to defend against not just monsters, but the exalted beings as well." Yor extended a crystalline orb, saying, "This orb can conjure a sanctuary in the form of a cave for you, which you can expand by amplifying its magic." Opening a portal to another realm, he moved towards it, adding, "Guard yourselves. You must endure for the sake of my triumph." After the ordeal, they climbed into their vehicle and set a course for Seoul. As Somin regained her senses, she asked, "Where's the boy?" Namgung assured her, "He's been taken to a sanctuary. He's safe there." "Why are we heading to Seoul if the sanctuary is as safe as they claim?" Somin inquired. Her father explained, "Once the first gates of hell close, a new dungeon will open. We desperately need the rewards that lie within. Those will help us grow stronger and prevent an even greater catastrophe." As they journeyed towards Seoul, the surroundings were eerily quiet. Burnt-out vehicles littered the streets, making it seem as if the apocalypse had already dawned. Turning on the car radio, they caught news that train services were disrupted due to track damages, and both the Sansan intersection and the Paju Expressway had been destroyed. Their journey was abruptly halted by a goblin that crashed onto their windshield. Coming to a halt, Namgung asked, "Is everyone all right?" The unanimous response was positive. Stepping out to assess the situation, an arrow whizzed past Namgung, piercing the goblin's head. A young man with a bow stood in the distance, having eradicated all goblins in the vicinity. He approached and apologized for startling them, adding, "I just wanted to keep you safe from those goblins." Surveying the surroundings, Namgung marveled at the young man's feat. A regular person couldn't handle such a horde with just a bow. He must be skilled, Namgung mused, then inquired about his name. The archer introduced himself as Chon. "I'm trying to reach my grandfather in the hospital, but it's hard on a bike. Could you please help me get to Seoul? I promise to repay your kindness." From his pocket, Chon produced a precious gem he had taken from the goblins and handed it over as a token of gratitude. Upon examining the stone, Namgung recognized it instantly. There are two types of powers people acquire at the carnival: innate talents bestowed at birth, and stats that anyone can acquire and amplify. This rune is a special artifact that boosts one's stats. Such runes are highly sought after, but the chances of obtaining them from monsters are incredibly slim. Namgung inquired about who taught the boy archery. The boy replied that it was his father, who used to be a member of the national archery team. After a tragic accident, he's been in the hospital. The boy added that his father's name is Chon Tai-ho. Namgung remembered him from a past life. He was a master of runes. Except for him and Anna Rian, no one else in the world possessed such an ability. Clans from around the globe wanted to hire Chon Tai-ho, but he had been in a coma for 7 years after a car crash. One of the 8 battle stars of Ira, often referred to as the Saint, spent a lot of time concocting an elixir to heal Chon Tai-ho. But after he recovered, he declined the clan's offer and was murdered, his body dumped into a lake. Namgung hoped that in this life, things would be different. He had a plan. Before heading to the hospital, they needed to make a detour. The boy was deeply perturbed by this suggestion. He was desperate to see his father and help him. Namgung explained that even if they go right now, they won't be able to assist due to goblins all over Korea. All available police, firefighters, and military have been summoned for assistance. First and foremost, they'll be safeguarding hospitals, which are far safer than the roads right now. Their current task is to collect as many demon heads as possible. If they manage to make the elixir, they can heal his father. This elixir costs 400,000 demon heads, and it's unlikely they'll collect that many on their first attempt. The boy was confused about how they knew all this, but Somin explained that her father is living his second life and knows everything. They must heed his advice to survive in this transformed world. Namgung added that everything will soon become clear. The boy just needs to be a bit more patient. Glancing at the car's clock, he saw that midnight had struck, signaling the beginning of everything. At that moment, a massive pillar of fire descended from the sky onto the highway, obliterating nearby vehicles. This event deeply frightened the children and his friend in the car. They had never witnessed anything like it. From the fiery pillar emerged Yasha, summoned by the higher spirits. His formidable presence terrified everyone inside the vehicle. Approaching closer, Namgung stepped out of the car, causing the demon to be taken aback. Yasha hadn't expected to encounter such a powerful adversary here, and immediately tempered his rage, pleading not to be killed. The man inquired if he could provide the elixir worth 400,000 heads. But Yasha responded that the carnival had already begun, and breaking its rules would bring about calamity. Those who were with him in the car also emerged, and were astonished at how easily he was conversing with the massive demon. Returning to the vehicle, Namgung fetched some items he had purchased with the heads earned from the goblins. These would be crucial for survival in the new dungeon. They needed to traverse it to collect as many demon heads as possible. Namgung left his friend to protect the people from monsters at the dungeon's exit, while he and the children ventured into the dungeon itself. Upon entering the dungeon, they encountered zombies, which were weak enough not to pose a threat to them. The boy with the bow and the girl, using her magic, eradicated the zombies. Somin shared that she had played a game where the objective was to destroy zombies, and had ranked second on its leaderboard, making these zombies a piece of cake for her. Her father cautioned her to be mindful and not overexert herself, recalling how she had passed out near the altar earlier. Approaching a corner, Namgung instructed the boy to handle 3 zombies lurking nearby. In an instant, Chan shot arrows through the heads of all 3 zombies. Namgung was deeply impressed. Such skill in a boy was remarkable. Namgung speculated that perhaps the boy had an innate talent for archery, much like his father had. Chan responded that he had felt a change in himself when everything began, making it easier for him to shoot. He promised to explain his sensations once he understood them better. Suddenly, the girl noticed a chest at the end of the room, guarded by several zombies. Without hesitation, she used her magic to eliminate the foes and dashed towards the chest. The man realized that the chest was booby-trapped and tried to stop his daughter, but she was too engrossed to hear him. He then asked the boy to shoot an arrow at the chest to trigger the trap. With his skills, Chan skillfully curved his arrow past the sprinting girl and hit the chest. An explosion echoed immediately. It seemed the girl had no chance of survival, having nearly reached the chest. Thankfully, the damage was minimal. The girl only singed her hair, having managed to dodge the explosion just in time. Namgung rushed to her side, ensuring she was unharmed. He took the moment to remind her of the lurking dangers within the dungeon and the importance of staying alert. They retrieved a key from the chest, which would grant them access to the lair of the dungeon's main ghoul. Approaching a massive door, they used the key to unlock it. Once inside, they were confronted by the dungeon's primary boss and his 4 guardians. Namgung quickly explained that to defeat the main ghoul, all 4 guardians must be eliminated simultaneously. Otherwise, the ghoul would continuously resurrect them. Recalling the amulet he had acquired from Yasha, Namgung put it on. This amulet had the power to slow down the resurrection of the ghoul's guardians. Their discussions did not go unnoticed. The ghouls immediately turned their attention towards the group. Realizing time was of the essence, Namgung summoned the spirits of the deceased to aid them in the battle. Somin directed her magical power towards one of the ghouls, severing its arms. Then, she unleashed a magical beam, burning half of its face. Such a powerful attack seemed lethal, but the ghoul persisted. Namgung then channeled the amulet's energy to immobilize the ghoul. After defeating one of the monsters, the boy and girl combined their efforts to subdue the remaining ones. Using the hidden magic of the amulet, Namgung vanquished the remaining ghouls and turned his focus to the main boss. But their efforts were in vain. The Ghoul King chanted a spell and resurrected his guardians. Revived, the ghouls attacked with even greater ferocity. They were formidable adversaries, challenging to combat. Namgung thought to harness his daughter's magical prowess to amplify the amulet's power. Holding it aloft, he beckoned her to channel her magic into it. He believed her magical force would radiate through the amulet, providing their sole chance to annihilate all the ghouls at once. But with the ghouls surrounding Namgung, the girl struggled to aim, fearful of harming her father. Still, she released her magical energy, striking 2 ghouls, but it wasn't enough to destroy them. Seeing the amulet as a significant threat, one ghoul lunged forward, knocking it out. It appeared that Namgung had exhausted his strength, dropping to one knee. The ghouls, even without their arms, loomed large and posed a significant threat. But it was only the beginning. The man gathered shards of the pendant, sharp as a knife's edge. Arming himself with them, he waited for the right moment when the ghouls would charge. Fortunately, he didn't have to wait long. Seizing the opportunity when they were undefended, he drove the shards into them. Then, grasping and holding one of the foes by the head, he asked his daughter to use her magic. Somin, taking careful aim, unleashed her spell. This time, all adversaries were vanquished by a single ability. Seeing this, the dungeon's main boss roared loudly, realizing he was now vulnerable. Approaching him, Namgung invoked the spirits once more to finish off the boss. But after the boss was defeated, he unleashed spikes that impaled Namgung. It was a shocking twist, for the seemingly vanquished boss still had the capacity to kill. Both Somin and Chan, rooted to the spot, were greatly astonished by what they had witnessed. Regaining his composure, the lad charged his bow with a magical arrow, tautly pulling the bowstring, and with a powerful strike, he finished off the boss who was feigning death. Realizing that this time he was truly dead, and there would be no more surprises, they approached closer. The boy also managed to retrieve another rune that fell from the boss. He mentioned that he gained an ability, and occasionally he sees foes who have a 100% chance of dropping such a rune. Namgung pondered if they could manage to heal and lure the rune master to fight alongside them. They could then harvest a multitude of these runes, granting them a significant advantage. The time had come to claim their reward for clearing the dungeon. Inspecting the contents of the chest, Namgung was elated, realizing they had lucked out with the rewards. Somin too was astounded by the number of items and gold coins they had acquired. Among the items was the glove of the Ghoul King's aura. Though it bore an unpleasant odor, it had the ability to heighten concentration. Namgung elaborated that concentration didn't necessarily ensure successful attacks. Everything depended on the weaponry and magic utilized. Concentration merely amplified existing capabilities. It was an item meant for an archer, so Chan decided to wear it. The foul stench emanating from the glove was too overwhelming for Chan, causing him to gag. Namgung chuckled at him, jesting that the odor might fade in about 3 years. But the crowning reward was a set of 3 keys, which could unlock an ancient treasure vault, meaning each of them would receive 1 key. There was also a scroll with a map of the treasure vault, ensuring they could find their way out. Handing a key to each, Namgung mentioned that once they ventured deeper into the dungeon, they would split up, reassuring them not to fear solitude. They understood that they would be able to choose only one door, and retracing their steps would not be an option. The boy asked what he should choose, but Namgung responded that he hadn't defended this place in his past life, and thus couldn't offer advice. All he knew was that the Guardian had acquired the Crown of Kundal, an artifact of the necromancers. He also mentioned that this was their initial foray into a dungeon, so they shouldn't linger. Especially since his friend Myung-hoon was awaiting them outside, thus they needed to make haste. Upon entering the treasury, he was amazed by the variety of doors that could be opened. This vault belonged to the Emperor, so the rewards were fitting. Venturing deeper, he examined the plaques on the doors describing the treasures behind them. Approaching one door, he saw Mornew's thorn blade inscribed upon it. He remembered having seen this blade in his past life. It was a dagger with dual hilts, wielded by a demonic hunter. They were excellent daggers, but utterly useless to them. Walking a bit further, he spotted a familiar name on a plaque. He couldn't believe his eyes. It was the Balansar's book. In his past life, he never managed to find this book, and now he was fortunate to come across it at the beginning of their adventure. Book of Balansar. It allowed the user to produce a new item when an ingredient was placed inside. The rank of the absorbed items ranged from common to rare. Ingredients did not influence the outcome, and everything was burned after the fusion. Using the key to unlock the door, he entered the chamber where the book was positioned centrally. Without hesitation, Namgung claimed it and headed for the exit. By that time, Somin and Chan had already made their choices and were waiting for him by the exit. Once reunited, they all shared stories about the treasures they had discovered. Soman showcased a bracelet named Fairy of the Lake. She was drawn to its name since items couldn't be chosen based on their description. This bracelet enhanced recovery if worn during sleep. Chan opted for a sword that also attracted him with its name and cool appearance. Namgung was puzzled as to why Chan chose a sword when he was skilled with a bow. Nonetheless, it was Chan's decision, and a good weapon might come in handy. Meanwhile, his friend Myung-hoon had found his comrade who was guarding the approach to the center of Seoul from goblins with his squad. Myung-hoon also joined the defense, battling the ceaseless waves of goblins. Although individually weak, their sheer number posed a significant challenge in defending the city. The foes kept pouring in, and the strength to battle them diminished with each passing moment. Surrounded by goblins, they still had the energy to crack jokes. Distracted by their conversations, they failed to notice one of the goblins throwing a dagger at them. Seeing the dagger at the last moment, Myung-hoon managed to push his comrade out of the way but couldn't dodge it himself, and the dagger plunged into his back. The situation was intense. His friend didn't know how to help Myung-hoon, as the dagger also induced paralysis. Despite the pain, Myung-hoon bravely started to rise, knowing they couldn't give up their position. With countless goblins ready to attack, if they breached this line, they would overrun Central Seoul, putting countless lives at risk. They were the last line of defense. Local news broadcasted their heroism. Everyone believed in these young men bravely defending their lives. The news labeled them the Destroyers for their resilience and courage in fighting the goblins. As the battle dragged on, their adversaries became stronger. On the horizon appeared a massive ogre that didn't seem as easy a target as the previous foes. Drawing nearer, the goblin took a mighty swing, striking the man with all its strength. Swiftly blocking the blow, the man wielded his weapon as a shield. Finding himself in a dire situation, he summoned all his might and thrust the goblin in the chest, sending it sprawling away. Kang Ho-jun activated his new ogre skill, and pain and fatigue melted away. Energy surged anew within him. He had a unique ability to regulate his breathing. With the power of the ogre, he could maintain minimal cerebral blood flow, conserving the vital blood for his brain. He channeled this conserved blood to his muscles, resulting in rapid muscle growth and superhuman strength. The very essence of being in the ogre state. After such a strike, the massive goblin staggered for a long while, clutching its chest. It seemed the man would finish off the towering creature. But suddenly a smaller, agile goblin dashed forward, stabbing its dagger into the man's leg. Kang Ho-jun was thrown off balance, which the larger goblin took advantage of, landing a powerful blow to his head. Leaping up, it tried crushing its adversary under its immense weight, aiming to inflict maximal damage. The fatal flaw of the ogre state was that it relied on restricting blood flow to the brain, a state unsustainable for long. Humans perish in about 10 seconds when cerebral blood flow is cut off. But in the ogre state, the flow isn't completely halted, allowing for roughly 5 minutes in this condition. Of the 5 minutes, the man had a mere 6 seconds left, and the enraged goblin charged at him, intent on delivering the final blow. With his last surge of energy, the man charged back. In 3 heartbeats, they met in a clash of titanic force. Afterward, the goblin lay with a gaping hole in its chest, left by a log strike. The man, having exhausted his final reserves, collapsed lifeless to the ground, his brain starved of blood. It seemed Myung-hoon understood the unfolding tragedy, left alone against a horde of goblins, with his comrade beyond aid. To his astonishment, a brilliant flash froze the approaching goblins in their tracks. It was Namgung, timely returning from the dungeon to find his friend. Looking at the fallen warrior, he declared, "Rest now," taking it upon himself to confront the remaining goblins. The timely reinforcements effortlessly dispatched the remnants of goblins that had besieged them. Myung-hoon inquired, with a touch of astonishment, as to how they arrived so swiftly without any vehicles, given the hordes of goblins on the roads. With a smirk, Namgung revealed they traversed an underground metro station, slaying every goblin in their path. After defeating the Goblin King, mere goblins were no threat to them. The boy, anxiety evident in his voice, reiterated concerns about his father. Namgung, sensing the urgency, assured him they'd soon be reunited and produce the Balansar book. He was certain that to elevate its rank to legendary, a rare artifact was required. Such an artifact turned out to be a pendant they no longer needed. His memory didn't betray him. Indeed, the insertion of the pendant elevated the book's rank to the legendary status. Now, any item placed within would be elevated in its characteristics to the same legendary status. The finest possession they had was a sword procured from Yasha, which he gifted to his friend. Without hesitation, he plunged it into the book, hoping to augment its might. Post-augmentation, the blade seemed different, now capable of absorbing the souls of slain demons, with a single touch of their crimson life essence. Namgung, not one to hold back, handed his comrade another blade, a marvel that could freeze anything it touched. Freezing the goblins had brought joy to its wielder, who was eager to test its prowess in battle. Young Chan was elated that everyone was armed. Yet the thought of the elixir for his father, costing 400,000 demon heads when they had only 25,000 from the dungeon, weighed on his mind. Namgung, with a mischievous glint in his eyes, reassured the boy. During his metro escapade, he earned the title Goblin Sovereign for his unmatched kill count. This title granted him access to the Goblin Treasury, where he procured 550,000 demon heads, more than enough to procure the coveted elixir for the boy's father. A smile, like the first rays of dawn, broke across the boy's face, rejuvenating him. The news filled his heart with hope, for he longed to see and heal his father. Namgung then turned his gaze to Hojun and Myung-hoon, advising them to attend a conference. There, they could rest and inform journalists of their prophetic status, thereby diverting public attention from the calamity unfolding. Meanwhile, he and the boy would venture to the hospital to reunite with the boy's ailing father. Upon entering the eerily silent hospital, they were struck by the unnerving emptiness. A few goblins shouldn't have wreaked such chaos. The boy, voice trembling, murmured that his father was in the ICU. They needed to hurry, lest it was too late to save him. Venturing deeper, they were startled by a desperate plea from a young woman. She recounted a grim tale of goblins overrunning the hospital, leaving death in their wake. With pleading eyes, she asked him to protect her, her voice quivering with fear. She extended her hand to him, silently imploring him to help her up. Namgung, captured by the girl's gaze, couldn't just walk by. He reached out, assisting her to rise from the cold ground. Noticing a ring on her finger, he remembered the legendary Shakan needle. Although not as lethal as the sting of the red hornet, its venom was potent. Realizing she was exposed, the girl swiftly drew a knife, attempting to strike Namgung. But he, having noticed the ring, was prepared and evaded her sharp thrust. But she didn't falter. With eyes full of determination, she lunged at him once more. Namgung deftly intercepted her and pushed her aside, trying not to harm her. Yet, the girl remained steadfast. She seemed to believe she could overpower this man. Namgung, not wanting to harm her, drew his legendary sword to demonstrate his power and threat. Her eyes widened in astonishment upon seeing the weapon. Even if he had defeated entire goblin armies, such a sword was unreachable at her level. In this post-apocalyptic world, Namgung saw in her a young lion, inexperienced yet ready for battles. Like a lion cub eager to explore, she was ready to test her strength. But when confronted with a true predator, a cub's audacity might wane. And that profound anxiety, the terrifying fear, makes one forget the instincts of a hunter. That was the fear she faced upon seeing the legendary sword. It became clear to her, against such an adversary, she stood no chance and should flee. To her, this man was akin to a dinosaur that even a mighty lion would fear. Namgung was still pondering what to do with the girl who tried to kill him, when suddenly his daughter and a boy named Chan appeared. They were shocked to see their father menacingly standing with a sword in front of a frightened girl, and inquired about the situation. Recalling his past life, he remembered a time by the fire when his friend Clark had asked Namgung never to kill without reason. The earth had become hell, where people murdered each other, a spectacle the demons would relish. He realized he must not succumb to evil. Namgung understood that he almost killed the girl in front of his daughter's eyes. But he decided it was enough just to scare her. He warned her to think twice before attacking people and to stay out of his sight. She promised. Upon entering the ICU, they saw Chan Tai-ho lying motionless on his bed, showing no signs of life. Namgung carefully removed the mask from Tae-ho's mouth and, with an elixir in hand, administered it to the man, hoping it would bring about a cure. After what seemed like an eternity, Tae-ho began to stir, his eyelids fluttering. Hope surged within them, the belief that the elixir was taking effect. Meanwhile, at the UK Central Security and Disaster Countermeasures headquarters, a young woman anxiously asked Alex if he had seen a YouTube video where two men battled a horde of goblins. He replied that he had and was equally disturbed by the footage. Joining their conversation, Another security officer expressed his concern. He was astonished that the two brave men fought off the goblins using conventional weapons. It was remarkable how they battled without using any rank weapons or swords. If they could slay that many goblins without advanced weapons, it could only mean one thing. These two were prophets. Alex, a prophet himself, unsheathed his sword, declaring the necessity to recruit these two into their ranks. However, should they refuse, they must be eliminated. Alex wanted to remain the sole prophet in the spotlight when monsters inevitably reached the shores of Britain. Meanwhile, Chan Tae-ho regained consciousness, and they headed home. Upon arrival, they faced a shock. Their home was completely destroyed. The other residents were also alarmed by the sight. This tragedy had changed their lives. They didn't know where to run from the omnipresent threat. It seemed like Yasha, or a creature like him, had landed on their house, causing such devastation. Namung informed them he had prepared a shelter for such an eventuality, and they needed to head there immediately. Without further hesitation, they made their way to the refuge located outside the city. They were all exhausted, having faced grueling days with no rest. Namgung explained that he had set up this refuge long ago, anticipating an invasion from North Korea. Upon entering, he assured them that the shelter was equipped with all the necessities for living through an apocalypse. He also activated a crystalline bead from the Goblin Citadel, which enhances and expands the living space. Upon its activation, the living quarters instantly felt more spacious and comfortable. Having ensured his daughter's safety, Namgung grabbed his phone, intending to call Alex. He needed to execute the plan he devised after his return from the past. By this time, Alex had already departed for Korea to meet with the presumed prophets to recruit them to his clan. Namgung cryptically warned Alex that the prophet of the Pathfinder was watching him and advised caution. This message infuriated Alex, sending him into a rage. He knew of a higher power with the ability to foresee the future. If the call was no hoax, then one of the prophets knew about him and his journey to Korea. He told his associates they should postpone their meeting with Kang Hojin and try to change the future. After hanging up, Namgung informed his ally that he had spoken to Alex and mentioned that Ninagawa Erika was monitoring him. Though unfamiliar with Erika himself, he was aware of Alex's cowardice and was merely exploiting his weaknesses. He also knew Erika would soon arrive in Korea. Namgung's strategy was to summon the three prophets to Korea to defend the city when the second gates of hell open. Leaving his daughter in the shelter, he sent his associate to meet Alex, while he himself headed to encounter Erika. Standing in one of Korea's skyscrapers, Alex awaited the meeting. He had chosen this height intentionally to avoid interference from third parties. Yet, he suspected possible surveillance and alerted his companions, who had accompanied him to Korea, of his suspicions. Kang Hojin entered the room and greeted the prophet. With a glimmer in his eye, Alex expressed his admiration for such a hero who had defended the city so valiantly, extending a hand whose very touch could delve into the secrets of one's mind. But Kang Hojin, with the wisdom of a seasoned warrior, seemed to be aware of this and tactfully avoided the handshake, feigning obliviousness. This left Alex perplexed, pondering how this military man could have possibly known of his unique talent. Yet he chose to mask his confusion, striving to maintain a convivial tone in their discourse. In the same poetic dance, Myung-hoon entered the room, and he too refrained from a handshake with Alex. The weight of realization pressed upon Alex, understanding that they indeed knew of his gift. Continuing the conversation, Alex admitted with humility that while they courageously defended their realm with life and limb, he was but a mere actor, portraying roles on a stage. But Myung-hoon interjected, emphasizing that without Alex's voice, their heroism might have remained unsung. It was he who illuminated the existence of prophets, drawing the world's gaze upon them. Shifting his tone, Alex inquired, with a hint of suspicion, if by chance they were these fabled prophets. With an air of mystery, Myung-hoon responded, indicating that he could not unveil all, for the identity of friend or foe was yet unclear. Understanding the gravity of leadership, Alex acknowledged the wisdom in Myung-hoon's caution. He implored that if they were indeed prophets, they must recognize the impending peril to their world. Joining forces was imperative to counter the looming adversaries that threatened their city's very existence. Unity was crucial, for soon, modern weaponry would be rendered impotent against the inexorable horde of monsters besieging their land. However, Myung-hoon retorted with skepticism, suspecting that beneath Alex's noble veneer lay a desire not for salvation, but dominion, aiming to amass prophets under his sway to reign over a transformed world. His accusations ignited a fury within Alex, summoning forth his blade as it became glaringly evident that his stratagem was no longer covert. With a heavy heart, he declared that their survival would thwart his grand design. And with a chilling finality, he uttered, "You shall meet your end here, Myung-hoon." Thank you for watching. If you need a continuation of this story, please write in the comments, as well as subscribe to the channel and like it.